Welcome back, horror movie lovers. Today I'd like to introduce another horror film called Baghead. On an inconspicuous street in America, a strange bar operates. The owner here never sells alcohol, but every visiting customer pays a $1,000 order. Their purpose is to visit the bar's basement and meet a woman who has lived in a cave for hundreds of years. Although her limbs are rough and her appearance is ugly, she possesses an extremely rare ability. She can transform into the deceased's appearance and inherit all their consciousness simply by swallowing their belongings. Simply put, she can resurrect the dead. However, the time limit is only 2 minutes. Once 2 minutes pass, Baghead takes over consciousness and turns into a highly aggressive evil spirit. So, Owen, the owner, is very cautious and even sets up an alarm timer. He also feels fortunate because others might take tens of minutes or even longer to earn a few $1,000s. He, however, only needs a mere 120 seconds. But everything going smoothly must mean something is wrong, and Owen already feels scared. Until this day, he carries a bucket of gasoline to the basement, determined to burn Baghead and everything around it clean. But something goes wrong midway. Owen is lured by Baghead, who has transformed into his wife, and he himself is first burned to a crisp, scrambling and rolling, finally perishing at the basement door. A few days later, his daughter Iris, who has been away from home for many years, receives news of her father's death. However, Iris does not feel overly sad. She has a deep rift with her father Owen. The reason dates back many years to when her mother, suffering from cancer, dies in the hospital. However, Owen, as her husband, never visits her. Therefore, Iris hates her father. However, she does not understand that her father also has his own difficulties. He also wants to come, but at that time, he is not free to do so. Weaver, as Iris inherits her father's estate and signs her name on the bar's deed. Her hatred for H-father gradually decreases, until she eventually feels guilty. After completing this series of tedious inheritance procedures, the time has already reached night. Iris tiredly lies on the bar's sofa with her eyes closed. As her thoughts become hazy, a sudden alarm clock rings, instantly startling Iris awake. Only she lives in the huge house, and she feels very scared. Following the sound, Iris slowly walks down the stairs and turns on the light. She discovers the sound comes from the basement at the end of the corridor. Iris goes forward and pulls the handle, finding it locked and unable to open. But just then, she glances out of the corner of her eye and sees a figure walking past the window behind her. Iris cautiously goes to meet it. Suddenly, the appearance of a middle-aged man startles her. The man tells her not to be scared, stating he has no ill intentions. Then he takes out $2,000 from his pocket, throws it on the counter, and asks Iris to take him to the basement to see that person. Being new, Iris completely does not understand, and she frowns. Neil takes out $2,000 from his pocket again, saying he will return tomorrow and also pay Iris another $4,000, stating he has an urgent matter to discuss with his wife. Iris is confused about what exactly is in the basement, because just a few days ago, she was penniless and worried about rent. So, on the second night, Neil arrives at the bar on time, and Iris's best friend also comes along to give her courage. Soon, the three of them unlock the basement door with a key, and the deep black hole on the wall also appears before their eyes. Seeing this scene, Neil immediately acts as if he has lost his soul, yelling into the hole and walking towards it. Iris, standing behind him, looks at him as if he is an idiot. She thinks to herself that $8,000 is too easy to earn. However, as a person vaguely appears from the hole, the smile on Iris's face instantly freezes. She did not expect that a Baghead actually lives in the basement. Neil excitedly yells that he wants to see his deceased wife, but Baghead directly passes him and walks straight towards Iris. Seeing this, her best friend grabs a stick and yells for it to retreat. Only when Iris also casually tells the Baghead to retreat does it stop. It seems to obey Iris's commands. When Iris tells it to retreat, it retreats. When Iris tells it to sit on the chair, Baghead does not resist at all and obediently complies. At this moment, Baghead actively reaches out to Neil, asking for an item. Neil quickly takes out what he says is his deceased wife's ring. Then, Baghead lifts its hood and swallows the ring in one gulp. Before long, it starts to struggle and roar. Since this is Neil's first time, and to be safe, he also ties Baghead's hands to the chair at Iris's suggestion. Suddenly, Baghead lets out a loud scream and convulses. This scares Neil, who quickly steps back and almost falls. Then, its body undergoes a series of changes. Its fingers transform from rough to delicate and fair. Neil is very excited, but when he calls out his wife's name and lifts the bag, the person's appearance truly startles him. It turns out the person is Neil's mother, who died many years ago. Also, his mother did not like Neil back then and often subjected him to mistreatment. However, the resurrected woman does not realize she is already dead. It is not until Neil blurts out that his mother committed suicide by drowning in the bathtub years ago. Only then does his mother recall the event and cries with her head down. Just then, water continuously seeps out from the cave opposite them. The group does not understand what this means. However, in reality, the 2 minutes are up, and Baghead gradually takes control of its consciousness. The mother's pupils in the chair also instantly turn black. Iris and the other two have not yet realized the seriousness of the situation. It wasn't until Baghead stretched his neck out, trying to kiss Neil, that they became frightened and quickly ran away. But when they look back again, the person locked in the chair has disappeared. Neil looks around and is suddenly tackled by his mother. At the same time, a large amount of liquid spews from her mouth. It seems to be the bathwater that drowned her back then. Fortunately, the woman next to her puts the sack back on Baghead's head, and it then calms down, spitting out the ring from its mouth before returning to the cave. Afterward, Iris and Katie, still shaken, lock the basement door. The man, still wanting more, explains that this ring was his mother's jewelry before he gave it to his deceased wife, which is why there were some problems, and he was too careless in his actions. He also mentions that an old man here previously set a rule. The time limit for resurrecting the Dia each time is 2 minutes. The man says they probably exceeded the time limit, which caused the trouble. Ter speaking, he places the remaining $4,000 on the bar, expressing his anticipatio for his next meeting with his deceased wife.
Просто хочу з нею попрощатись.
After the man left, Iris and Katie calmed down and began watching the videotape that her father Ha left behind before he passed away. According to the explanation from the lawyer who previously dealt with her, her father specially recorded this for the future owner of the bar. At the very beginning, Owen's words are somewhat frightening. He says that as long as they see this, then they must always be prepared for death. Because there is a special tenant beneath this house. As long as their name is written on the deed, then it will also be bound by them and obey them. However, this is only limited to outside that cave. Once the house's manager steps inside the cave, then they still die as they should, although it possesses the ability to bring people back from the dead. Owen warns her not to use it for her selfish desires.
Її з підвалу. Ніколи. Тільки ви не пускаєте її у зовнішній світ.
Hearing this, Iris seems to understand her father's past struggles. However, her eyes are already full of desire. She wants to use Baghead's ability to make a lot of money. $8,000 for one time. 2 times equals one person's entire year's salary. Her best friend advises her to stop. However, Iris is already tainted by desire. She promises to do it for only 3 days and then stop. So early the next morning, Iris rushes to Neil's address to inform him to come over tonight. Katie, left alone at the bar, always feels uneasy, as she pushes a large iron barrel to block the basement. A photo frame on the wall nearby suddenly shatters on the ground. Katie examined the photo and realized it was a picture of 2 men. However, she feels there is some hidden meaning. Katie also sees his name previously written on the deed. He must be the former owner of the house. Katie quickly searches online. It says that in 1995, this bar owner named Otto mysteriously dies at the bar counter in the store. Just as Katie closes her laptop to clear her thoughts, she suddenly sees that Otto resurrected. But when Katie lowers her head to pick up a stick, she finds there is no one at the bar. The scene changes. The 3 people in Baghead gather again in the bar's basement. Neil hands Baghead a pendant to eat this time. The moment Baghead twitches to revive his wife, Iris behind them quickly sets a 2-minute alarm. Then Neil lifted the curtain, finally getting his wish and seeing the wife he had always longed for. He touches her face with emotion, tears already flowing from the corners of his eyes. His wife, however, looks bewildered, her mind is a blank. Under Neil's guidance, his wife finally recalls the moment she had a car accident that night. His wife has countless questions in her heart, but Neil's eyes suddenly fill with resentment, and he asks her only one thing: who she was going to meet at the time and who the interloper is. But even though time is running out, his wife still says she does not understand what Neil is talking about. Neil becomes furious.
Слухай, я хочу жити далі! Просто скажи, що сталося?
Айріс.
It questions if one can truly control their emotions when they are about to lose something important. Clearly, Neil fails to do so. This causes the situation to escalate seriously. Suddenly, Baghead's power greatly increases, causing Iris, who went to intervene, to fall into a car crash hallucination. She finds his wife is now crouching in a corner, crying. She mutters that he does not want to die. Iris carefully steps forward and lifts the hood. Just then, Baghead roars, turns around, and tackles her. It is still early, and Iris has the identity of a manager. In addition, Baghead's power is very weak at this time. It can only return to the cave again. Afterwards, Iris drinks alone until late at night. She does not know if her actions are correct. She glances at her father's photo again and decides to do something. Immediately, Iris hands her father's watch to Baghead. Baghead swallows it in one gulp and roars. Iris set her alarm and lifted the veil covering her head.
Тобі не можна тут бути. Як ти мене знайшла?
Я власниця пабу.
After learning that Iris inherited the bar, Owen is heartbroken, because he had already instructed his lawyer before his death to sell the bar and then transfer the inheritance to his daughter. Iris, however, during the handover that day, Iris insisted on taking over the bar and signed the deed. Her reason to the lawyer is that she wants to stay longer where her father lived. For this reason, although Owen is angry, he can only remind his daughter not to use the thing's power until it invades her mind. As he speaks, the alarm clock nearby rings. Flames ignite on Owen's body, and he is in great pain. As he departs, he pleads with his daughter not to revive him again, because he cannot bear the pain of each departure. He says he actually deeply loves the mother and daughter, but he is forced by the curse of the deed. He has to stay in the bar as a manager for his entire life. That night, Iris starts having some bizarre nightmares. She sees her father frantically tearing off his own face. Then he reveals a burlap sack face beneath the skin. Iris desperately chokes him. She questions what he did to her father. But while exerting force, she also feels a strong sense of suffocation. Afterwards, she collapses, clutching her neck. Her other hand pulls off the person's hood. Only then does she realize the person she chokes is herself. Soon, Iris immediately wakes up from the dream. But that feeling of suffocation still has not dissipated. She discovers that the pendant is tightly wrapped around her neck. She frantically fumbles for scissors. But by this time, she is choked and loses strength. Collapsing to the ground, Katie hears the commotion and rushes over. She quickly uses scissors to cut the restraint for her. At this point, Iris already realizes what her father says. The side effects of Baghead already start to manifest on her. Due to Iris's physical weakness, Katie drives off alone. Soon she arrives at the old home of Otto, Owen's previous landlord. Decades later, the place is dilapidated, dirty, and smelly. Katie kicks open a partition at a dog hole and enters the house. She is surprised to find that Otto also seems to be looking for the secret of the bar's basement. His bedroom walls are covered with information about that place. Because Katie cannot understand it all at once, she packs up all the data and leaves a voicemail for Iris at the bar, saying they can revive Otto late and asking him what exactly happened at the bar back then. Meanwhile, Iris in the bar once again falls into a hallucination and collapses onto the ground. This happens because she just tried to burn the deed to break the curse. but she is surprised to find that the paper cannot be lit by the flames at all. Soon, Katie arrives at the bar with the data. He searches everywhere without success and finds that Iris is not answering her phone. Just then knocking sound comes from the basement again. She was worried about Iris's safety, so she lowered her voice and called out Iris's name as she went down the stairs. Just then, Baghead suddenly lunges behind Katie. She gets scared and quickly rolls away to keep her distance from it. At the same time, Otto's data, which she carries, also falls to the ground. To keep Katie from escaping, Baghead immediately swallows one of Otto's relics and revives him. At this point, Katie also falls into Baghead's trap and begins to ask Otto about the whole story.
Нащо ти мене повернула?
Otto reveals everything he knows, explaining that 400 years ago, an ancient church discovers a woman who possesses astonishing abilities and can summon the dead. So these church members want to abuse her power to satisfy their greed. When the woman refuses, she is labeled a witch by the church members and local people. They push her into a fire pit and incinerate her alive. However, death cannot keep the woman. After her resurrection, she begins to unleash ruthless revenge. Many crops wither, and a plague rages among the people. For this, the church specifically holds a dark ritual. They imprison the woman in this underground catacomb. But until she is almost forgotten, the descendants of these church members, for their own selfish gain, unauthorizedly unearth the witch's grave and once again abuse her power. And the more people use her, the more power the witch gains from their greed.
Відкала смерть. Зараз між нею та світом стоїть лише хранитель. Той, хто підписує документ власника, успадковує прокляття і має стримувати її помсту.
At this point, Katie still wants to ask about a way to escape, but she has no idea that she has already run out of time. With a roar from the witch, the basement door slams shut. Meanwhile, Iris, who is in the room on the other side, is finally woken up by her phone's vibration. She quickly answers, realizing it is Katie calling. Her words are urgent. She tells Iris to hurry and save her, as she is in danger in the basement. Immediately, Iris rushes all the way to the basement. Eventually, she hears Katie's cries from deep within the cave. Iris instinctively picks up a lamp and prepares to go. As she approaches the cave entrance, she remembers her father's warning. But a life is at stake. So Iris hesitates for a moment but still goes alone. The scene behind the dark hole is also presented on screen as she enters. Inside, a narrow corridor stretches, leading to an unknown destination. The tunnel twisted and turned. Katie's hoarse cries for help echoed continuously. Finally, Iris finds Katie in a cave around the corner. The two do not say much, carefully heading back towards the exit. But as a ceramic jar falls, Iris discovers that in an adjacent cave, the deceased Katie lies. Her eyes are white, and her face is covered in bulging veins. The witch has already drained her body. The witch impersonates Katie with the goal of having Iris lead it out of the basement. Seeing its plan fail, it immediately reveals its true form and crawls onto the wall. Iris runs wildly. Fortunately, as she nears the cave entrance, Neil arrives just in time and pulls her out. She then safely leaves the basement, narrowly escaping danger. After understanding the situation, Neil tells Iris not to blame herself. He then takes out a sedative he carries and has her take it to calm her emotions. But after drinking this glass of water, Iris unexpectedly feels very sleepy. When she wakes up again, the sky outside has already turned dark. She immediately realizes something. She walks to the basement and indeed hears Neil talking to the witch inside. He is making a pact with the witch so he can always see his deceased wife, Sarah. Finally, he frantically signs his name on the deed. However, the witch shakes her head. Neil's name, written on it, then vanishes. It implies that Neil needs to eliminate the current homeowner to become his own supervisor. Then, they discover Iris, who is hiding and eavesdropping. Neil quickly chases after her. With nowhere else to go, Iris runs to the bar's rooftop. She yells at Neil to sober up and not let the witch ignite his desires. However, Neil's inner self is actually a paranoid person with extreme control issues. Because he grows up in an environment of mistreatment. He severely lacks a sense of security as an adult. His wife does not cheat, she simply cannot stand Neil's extreme possessiveness. Which is why she chooses to drive away from home that night. The real reason for the car accident is that Neil puts the same sleeping pill Iris just took into his wife's water cup. Neil now deeply regrets everything he has done. For someone with his personality, every day is agony as long as his wife is out of his control. So Neil plans to use the witch's power to resurrect his wife. To have her by his side every moment. And to control her. Because negotiating with this madman is impossible. Iris breaks free and quickly climbs down the opposite fire escape. But Neil, who has recovered, grabs her hands tightly. He glances at the terrified Iris, shakes his head contemptuously, and then pushes her forcefully. Afterward, he takes Iris's body to the basement and throws it in front of the witch. However, Neil might be stubborn, never having seen a riddle since childhood. Perhaps he is still beaten silly by his mother. He surprisingly asks the witch to resurrect Iris. Then he wants Iris to add her name to the deed and transfer it to him. This action exactly matches the witch's wish. The witch picks up Iris's handed-over phone and then swallows it whole. In an instant, the witch transforms into Iris's appearance. She looks bewildered. He looks bewildered until she discovers the corpse thrown in the corner nearby. And only then do she realize Neil just killed her. Immediately after, the witch takes over Iris's consciousness, saying good words to thank Neil.
Дякую тобі. Моя хранителька мертва. І ти її повернув. Ти не розумієш? Моє ім'я все ще на папері. Я її хазяйка. І тепер вона. Це я.
Afterward, the witch pulls Neil into an illusion and tortures him. Then she picks up a chair, raises it high, and neutralized him with one blow. At the end of the story, the witch uses Iris's body as an overseer to leave the basement. And then she sets a big fire from top to bottom in the bar, burning down this forgotten place that imprisoned her for 600 years. Thus, the movie ends. See you again in the next movies.